slide 10. So thinking about those features of well-designed assignments, now we want to hone in on sort of what about those assignments makes them good at promoting academic integrity. So one of the elements of one of the assignments I shared is this idea of choice. So the assignment we didn't look at offered students the choice of using VoiceThread or presenting in Zoom. And what we know about some of the reasons students violate academic integrity is that they have limited motivation or interest in the assignment they're being asked to do. This isn't an excuse, this is just one of the reasons that's cited in the literature about why students might cheat. So when we give students options, we increase their motivation since they can pick something that's of interest to them, something that's relevant, something that they're able to do. And this is by no means intended to decrease the rigor of the assignment, but we do want to provide that choice. We also want to provide that flexibility. So this is an aspect of universal design. So this idea of giving students multiple ways to represent knowledge. So if we have an assignment for students where we're giving them the option to write a paper or create a podcast or a video, then we're allowing them to represent knowledge in different ways. It is quite difficult, I would imagine, to create a podcast that you've not done your own work to create. So thinking about choice and flexibility when you're designing assignments as ways to enhance academic integrity. Also thinking about feedback. So the assignments I shared also have rubrics. The rubrics, some of them contain specific criteria related to citing sources. So this is important so students know that you'll be looking for proper citation and referencing. And the rubric is also important because it's how you show your presence and convey to students you're engaging with their work. You actually read the assignment. And one of the reasons students plagiarize is that they sense that no one is looking at their work, so it doesn't matter. So we want to show students that we're paying attention to what they're doing and that we're engaging with them. This will also help us recognize their writing style and their speaking style, so that if later on in the semester they do something that deviates from that style quite a bit, then you might wonder if there's something happening. So we also want to think about pacing of assignments. So this is good practice generally, so that students can complete things in chunks and then get feedback on what they're doing. The other way that this promotes academic integrity is that students have more time to complete things. I realize that even when we space things out, there'll be students who don't meet the deadline or hand things in at the last minute. But for students who want to be on top of what they're doing, when we space out assignment, it gives them more time. They don't tend to feel as pressured, and there's less time to cut corners. We also, again, want to give students feedback early and often. One way to do this is to allow students to submit drafts of their work. And again, this will help you recognize their style. Finally, incorporating reflection into assignments is important for a variety of reasons. It's a great illustration of Ignatian pedagogy, having students reflect on what they've learned, how they can learn that knowledge to advance society in some way. It helps us promote our learning. Specifically with regard to the academic integrity, when we ask students to reflect, they have to explain how they did their work, what thought process they went through, what steps they took to complete an assignment. And it's difficult for them to come up with this type of explanation on their own. So I know there's some comments in the chat right now that I didn't get a chance to see. So let me look at these. Let's look at these for a minute before we post the other question. So waiting exams, yeah, we talked about that. Managing drafts in a large class, yep, that's a good question. So that's where peer review comes in, as Susan mentioned. Allowing students to give feedback on each other's work, that can be helpful. Sakai does have a peer review function, that's true. So in terms of the section that we just looked at, in the chat, we can now turn our attention to examples of things that you've done to promote academic integrity in your assignment design. So that's what we're looking at in the chat now. or feel free to raise your hand and we'll unmute you either way. So what strategies do you use to design assignments that promote academic integrity? And what ideas do you have about how to enhance existing assignments to promote academic integrity? Limiting the reuse of assignments. Yes, that's actually a really basic suggestion that I usually include and did not include here. So changing your assignments from semester to semester, that's a really great reminder. Students do talk to each other and they may share work. So even if it's just a tweak or a new focus, a slightly new focus, definitely changing your assignment prompts every semester. Dan, did you want to say a little bit more about peer review and how it works to catch intentional or unintentional plagiarism?
Yes. So for me, since I teach writing, I try to use the peer review to catch any issues of plagiarism, whether the student is doing intentionally or unintentionally, before the final draft. And so for me, it kind of gives me the opportunity to have a face-to-face conversation with the students. Well, obviously not this time, right? But it gives me the opportunity to at least address the student, because sometimes students bring in bad habits from high school where the plagiarism, it's passable, but at this level it's kind of hard, where we're very high level critiquing. So if a student doesn't know, that's also one of those learning moments too for the students, where we're like, okay, hey, this is wrong. So before you turn in the final essay, which requires plagiarism or can give you an automatic 0 or an F, and there are processes involved in that, let's fix this. So I try to use the peer review as an early intervention to address any issues with citation, lack of citation, or just blatant plagiarism. Because that's usually when I get the students that are like, I worked all night, and so I just hurry up and pulled this together. Sort of to your point, where students are just trying to get the work done and turn it in. So we know that sometimes plagiarism derives out of panic and fear, but it also has long-term consequences. No excuse, but I mean, that's usually the #1 reason why students do that.
Thanks, Dan. That's helpful. Other thoughts about strategies that you've used or plan to use, or questions that you have regarding assignment design?
May I add something, if you don't mind?
Please.
Yeah, hi. So I teach Arabic. So for us, possibly we do more of oral testing when it comes to online transfer than we do the weighing on the written piece. But for us, similar to some of the comments that I've heard earlier, some of the encounters we'll have is for people either to use the Google translation, which again is very easy to spot. You could always tell when something and how it's translated. Plus the different level of the student, based on what you know them versus how the assignment turned out to be, etc. So for us, already in our syllabus, it lists out the kind of things that are considered against our policies and what does that mean. And that includes, for instance, having a friend do my assignment, asking a heritage speaker to do it for me, using Google Translation. So we really list those 4 or 5 big main ones where people could, go into. And we discuss that in the classroom, and we turn it into students, how would you consider that as a concept of fairness to each other? How is that based on the ethics and moral of the institution we work in, etc. So we really make it more of an ethical issue. And I do tell students, honestly, that I do prefer not to report any case of plagiarism because of its consequences. So we try, a first time, a one-on-one talk to the student, etc. And I may warn of a 0 grade on that assignment. If it happens again, then I would report it. I rarely ever had to report anything. So out of my 9 years now at Loyola, maybe once I had to report that. So I'm very proud of the students, you know, but again, we'll have to talk over and over. With the switch online, it's the Google Translation that was mostly used, of course, and or family members for heritage speakers. And again, I had to take actions, you know, but we had to switch to more oral. So students will be in front of me, and that's how we test certain things, etc. It worked all right for us, generally speaking. We had students listening to each other. And I have to admit, you know, when I did send some of the students who used Google their punishment for that grade, they took it gracefully. You know what? They understand that what they did was not accepted, and we moved on. And again, that doesn't mean we penalize them again for other assignments. So that was very nice. We already created a culture of, you know what? We do make a mistake, we learn from it, we move on. So it does not become a fearful, you know, or that it does affect the relationship between the teacher and the student when being caught. So that was really the way we try to make sure that these are learning moments for us to grow. And similar to what Dan said, it's like some students come without a real understanding of what academic integrity, and regardless why they use it, not the excuse, but having to speak about it and frame it in a certain way helped us in Arabic, at least.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sats. And those are some great examples of the dividends building relationships with your students pays, the way to approach academic integrity as a community issue, an ethical issue, absolutely. I see that there are some other comments. I'm going to hold off for a minute so that we can move to the next session,